Welcome to the latest episode of First Word in Sport. How are you on yet another wet and rainy Friday morning, James?
All good, Luke. Yeah, it's becoming a little bit ridiculous amount of rain here in London at the moment. Yeah, can't complain. Watched the rugby last night. Always good to see France turn up in a big game. Yourself?
All good. So, in terms of talking about the rugby, what we're going to do is we've been thinking about this and we're going to separate football from all the other sports, both on a Monday and on a Friday. There's just too many other sports to talk about to do them justice. So we're going to split them up. So this will be a football only podcast. Let's start looking at what we've had this week. On Monday night, we had one of the worst games of the season, Sunderland Burnley. Obviously, Sunderland won very comfortably 3-0. Burnley just didn't turn up, and I haven't actually seen Parker slate his team too often, but they were absolutely dreadful. And long been of the belief that they're the worst team in the league, but this actually showed it properly.
Yeah, garbage performance, garbage attitude. Deserved nothing from the game. Sunderland are hard to beat at home. They've got a great record, even without Granit Xhaka, who's still injured. I don't know if he's back fit this weekend, but
Nope.
So Arsenal will be delighted tomorrow. He's not playing. Shame actually he's not going to play. Go back to the Emirates. Yeah, Burnley are down, and I've maintained it. The Premier League should be 18 teams. There's too many weak teams at times in the Premier League.
So yeah, not much more to add to that game, really. I think
No.
the only thing I would say is I do think GR is an interesting player for Sunderland in that he started the season off really well and then picked up an injury, been away at AFCON. Obviously, Xhaka's out, but he does fill a role in that midfield area. You know, he's a pretty useful player. I mean, Sunderland have done so well in terms of recruitment this year because I don't think people quite realise how poor their team was in the Championship last year when they came up. I mean, they were not fortunate to come up, but they certainly were the weakest of the teams in terms of the playoffs last year. And they came into, potentially into the season with the weakest, team squad by a country mile. And their recruitment's been brilliant. And I think Lebris also deserves a ton of credit.
Yeah, it makes a mockery of some Liverpool fans talking about they've got too many new players in their team when Sunderland have got 6 or 7 new players and looking like a proper unit at a time. So it can be done. It's against the norm. You normally only want to bring in 2 or 3 players into your first team, but Sunderland have gone the opposite way, spent really well, and it's an outstanding season. They're obviously safe, they're not going down, and they could in theory push for 7th or 8th, and they might get into the Europa League or the Conference League, next season, which would be a remarkable achievement.
I think for them, just a bit of just solidifying their position as a Premier League team. So next year will be a big one where, when they don't have the amazing start, to see whether they can, I think they're fortunate that the teams coming up aren't going to be great. But anyway, that's enough Sunderland Burnley chat. So the other big event of the week was obviously Carabao Cup. We obviously had Arsenal Chelsea. Arsenal won 1-0, go through winning 4-2 on aggregate. Havertz scored a very late goal to add gloss to what was a truly terrible game of football. I've obviously nicknamed Arsenal the Unwatchables. This doesn't do much to change that.
Boring Arsenal. 1-0 to the Arsenal. Look, they were 3-2 up. All the pressure was on Chelsea to come and try and get a win. Rosenior set his team up playing Delap on the right-hand side, tried to get to half-time 0-0 almost, and then reevaluate, which he did. Arsenal didn't do anything at all in the entire game. It was quite ridiculous. But that's Arteta for you. He was so defensive, he's so negative as a manager. I think eventually they'll catch up and you're in a big game. So you're going to have to attack at some point. And then Chelsea just didn't throw the kitchen sink at them. I thought after 65, 70 minutes, when I was still falling asleep, that they might actually have a go. They chucked on Estevao and Palmer, and they still didn't have a go. Didn't really threaten Arsenal at all, really. They didn't really make Kepa make a save. They didn't really do anything with the ball. And Arsenal found it very comfortable, and they didn't have to do anything. So you can see at the other side, from Arsenal's point of view, that we're ahead in the tie. You have to score a goal against us, and we know we're very good defensively because we have 4 centre-backs and 2 defensive midfielders. With strange tactics from Rosenior in the last 20-25 minutes of the game when they needed to score, and even if Arsenal scored, they had to score 2, so no away goals. Yeah, odd from Chelsea the last 20 minutes.
So it's interesting some of the narratives you see around this game. Whether Rosenior got it wrong, whether he got it right, whether Arteta obviously got an amazing outcome, very comfortable, really, for Arsenal. I tend to look at these things slightly differently, I think, in that I think Arsenal are the better team by a comfortable margin. When you're the better team, I think you want to be slightly more open. You want to play to your strengths. And obviously Arsenal are brilliant defensively, but Arsenal are just that much better, I think, than this particular version of Chelsea. And you saw that in the first leg. Yes, it was 3-2, but Arsenal could easily have won that by a bigger margin than they did. I think the problem you have when you get as negative as Arsenal did is it only takes one moment of magic. So we saw someone like Fernandes have so many shots from just on the edge of the box. He is the type of player who can stick one of those in the top corner. Obviously, when they sail harmlessly over the bar, everyone forgets. There were a few set pieces where it wasn't miles away from going in, little flicks, and, on a different day, one of those goes in, and you're heading to extra time. And, there was a penalty shout for a holding on Saliba. I don't know whether it's been confirmed that it was because the set piece wasn't in the box yet, but if that's not holding, I don't know what is. He's basically got the player around his waist, dragged him to the floor, and then has actually held him on the floor just for fun as well. All it takes is one of those moments, and that's a tied game, which isn't where Arsenal should be given their superiority.
Yeah, I take the point. They could have gone out in the first half if they wanted to and tried to stamp their authority on the game rather than just going, try and break us down, Chelsea. But that's Arteta for you, isn't it? I mean, even the free kick at the end that the referee allowed and encroached about 6 or 7 yards, if that goes in the top corner with 5 minutes to go, the crowd start getting nervous again. It's going to extra time. Anything could happen. It could be a sending off, could be another injury, anything. As I said a couple of minutes ago, in a 2-legged game, in the Champions League whenever it is, Arsenal have to play slightly differently. They won't. They're going to have to, because one of these days, they're not going to be able to keep clean sheets all the time. Saw it last year as well.
I mean, and conversely to that, I saw Rosenior get some criticism. But when you're the poorer team, or when you've got a weaker team, it's not in your interests to go to Arsenal and play hugely expansive football. You want to keep it as tight as possible, certainly for that first half, which they did. And what you want to try and do is truncate the game. So I've been a big believer in this for a long, long time, is that if you're a poor team, if you can take 10, 15, 20 minutes out of a game, almost aimlessly passing the ball around the back. So if you have a team who doesn't press you, you're much better off a game is only a 70-minute game against the better team than you are if it's a 90-minute game. And you can see that from the betting markets. If a game was only 60 minutes long, the favourite isn't going to be as big a favourite over a 60-minute game than it is a 90-minute game. The longer the game goes on, the more you would expect the superiority of the better team to come through. So from a Chelsea perspective, truncating that game into one half of football, where particularly with things like set pieces and, as you say, refereeing decisions, all these types of things, I think that's in Chelsea's favour. I think one thing that you touched on, which was slightly strange, was at the end, was their reluctance to actually get the ball in the box. I know Gabriel and Saliba are good in the air. We know that Arsenal play with 4 centre-backs effectively, right? So they are going to be good in the air. But it's still, at that point in the game, you want to get the ball in the box.
Yeah, I said, let's get to 70 minutes, you're still 0-0, you're still in the tie. And they only needed one chance, really. And they didn't create that chance, didn't throw the kitchen sink. Yeah, that's what teams do, stay in the tie. You don't need to be going gung-ho, opening up, and then concede on a counter. You're out the tie, you've got to score 2 when they only needed to score 1 to take it to extra time. Yeah, that was the only thing from Rosenior. He also had a little moan, didn't he, about the Arsenal, the Arsenal, not team members, players, but it was like the backroom staff being in their half. And it's quite right to have a go. Stay in your half, lads. It's like Arteta, stay in your technical box again. No, I see you got booked again, Arteta.
It's different, right? So if you go and watch a game, before the game, you'll see the goalkeepers, they'll ping long balls and things like that. It's a bit of a non-story, to be honest. It's blown up. I'm surprised that Rosenior would even bother mentioning it, to be honest. So one aspect of that game, so we did get a question, and I know the person who sent this question, actually. But so what he said was, what are your thoughts on the VAR decision and even more unbelievable explanation of the Chalobah challenge on Martinelli on Tuesday night? Natural movement when you can clearly see he raises his leg to trip Martinelli. The defender knows exactly what he's doing and got away with one. To me, it highlights that referees have no idea what it's like to play the game. Should ex-players be sat in the VAR booth with the referee to have the experience of playing elite football?
To the second point, yeah, I do think they should have footballers giving advice. Because I think at times, I think they try and make an issue to stop or give a decision or change a decision anyway. But that's a different story. I don't think it's a penalty. I think he's got the ball and it's not a penalty for me. I can understand the viewpoint of he's raised his foot, but he's not a penalty in my view.
So I would look at it differently. I think the initial coming together is fine, but that ball was then available for either player to go and get, and he's deliberately he knows exactly what he's doing. He's lifted his foot up to stop him doing that, and I think, let's put it this way: if that gets given as a penalty, does it get overturned? No.
Yeah, probably. But then that's the whole point of VAR, isn't it? Is it clear and obvious? You just don't know. That's the thing. But
I've no problem with that. When it's deliberate, you're deliberately intending to bring a player down, like he was. I think I'm no problems with that being a penalty. I think one aspect I would say is, in terms of ex-players being in the VAR booth, I think everything I've seen from ex-players, certainly from a punditry point of view and their so-called expertise, I don't think I'd want them anywhere near a VAR booth, to be honest.
Really?
So many of them are absolute clowns.
I don't disagree with that, but it might give a different perspective on the game and what they're thinking. But then I suppose the referees aren't looking at, they're just looking at the law kind of thing. They're not looking at, the law doesn't bring into the effect of the feel of the game, that's the thing.
It doesn't need to be more subjective.
Which it would be, I suppose, yeah, if you have ex-players in there, yeah.
So one thing I think they do need to sort out is, I think one referee is almost not enough these days. So I think the game's almost too fast for one ref. We're seeing so many games now where there's so many really poor decisions, just literally throughout the whole game. It's not a case of just getting the big ones wrong. The number of inconsistent decisions made in terms of tackles, it's almost like the game's just too fast for one referee. The only problem with having two refs is then the level of consistency across those two referees. So you can just imagine one ref giving, we're trying to let the game flow, and this other ref goes up, no, or we'll give a yellow card for this or a yellow card for that, which, opens up a whole can of worms. But I don't think...
It would never work. I mean, they tried it in Australian Rugby League years ago when they had two referees for one half, and it got binned off after a year. Because of that reason. They were just different interpretations of law. You're playing almost a different game. Because I remember going to, quickly on last bit on referees here, I remember going to a Q&A at Harlequins Rugby Union 10, 15 years ago and asking the management there at the time, do you prepare differently when you know the referees? I know rugby's different in terms of referees have a different way of refereeing a game to each other. And they were like, yeah, we do prepare differently during the week for which referee we have at the weekend. So having two referees would be not.
I do want to just touch briefly on the Saliba incident, because we had an incident the weekend with Haaland where he was obviously being grabbed, and they said it wasn't a penalty because the ball wasn't in play yet. Now, I don't know with the Saliba one whether it was a case whether the ball wasn't in play or not, but you cannot, if the ball's not in play, the referee has to stop that play and reset it. You cannot have players on the floor because they've been wrestled to the floor, and then the corner kick come in and say, oh, that doesn't count because the ball's not in play yet. It's just, they have to sort it all out. It's an absolute joke.
What, change the rule? The ball's in the quadrant, and it's ready for a corner, it's in play. So the ball's live, essentially.
Something like that. They have to change something. They can't have a situation where you've got players being wrestled to the ground, so when the ball actually gets kicked in, the player's on the ground. You can't have that. That's just ridiculous.
I just don't understand how it's not a foul in the penalty area and a penalty or a free kick when you do it anywhere else on the pitch. It's an automatic free kick. The referee will just blow up straight away.
There was no doubt in my mind that's a penalty. In the same way the Haaland one was.
The Haaland one's a penalty. Yeah. You see it every week, every game.
And the problem is, you don't clamp down on that sort of stuff, and it'll happen again, and it only gets worse because people will keep pushing and pushing as to what's acceptable. And then the problem you also have is that next week you're going to get a referee in a big game who gives a decision which is not as bad as those ones, and they'll actually give a penalty, and it'll be a crucial game, and it'll be a crucial decision. It'll probably be... it's coming. That's the point, is that the inconsistency with it is crazy.
Yeah. Two takeaways from that game, actually. João Pedro's in some form for Chelsea. He was brilliant, I thought, on Tuesday night, holding the ball up. He turns Saliba, the greatest centre-back ever lived, apparently, according to Arsenal fans. He's not even the best French centre-back. Not even the best centre-back at his club. and he held the ball up, turned him inside out. He's brilliant. Declan Rice, apparently, his performance is worthy of Player of the Year, according to one well-known journalist.
So let's call him out, Henry Winter. It tends to be a theme with someone like Henry Winter. So I saw him have a piece yesterday as well, apologising basically for Eddie Howe, saying he needed more support and what an incredible job he was doing and blah, blah, blah. I mean, if there's a narrative to be spun, whether it be a Rice player this season, Henry will spin it if he thinks he'll get access to that particular player or manager. I mean, we saw it with Ten Hag. He was singing the praises of Ten Hag whilst he could get access to him, when I think it was clear for everyone to see it just wasn't happening. But we see that we see that with the media all the time.
Yeah, I would argue that Szoboszlai and Morgan Rogers have had just as good a seasons than Declan Rice this season.
Well, he's not. I wouldn't at this point. I don't think he's their most important player. I think Gabriel probably is, on the basis of set pieces and everything else.
Yeah. Should we move on to the Newcastle Man City game on Wednesday night?
So Newcastle had a trick. It was always going to be a tricky game. They were trailing 2-0, got off to a very ugly start. A pretty unfortunate goal with the ball ricocheting off Marmoush and over Ramsdale. It's at that point things start getting really tricky as to how you actually sort of play out the rest of the tie. They did actually then miss a really good chance a couple of minutes later. Visser, I think it was Visser, I can't remember. They missed some really good chances in that game. Manchester City's defence is so bad. But essentially Newcastle had to press, and they pressed recklessly, I would suggest, and they got thumped really. 5-1 on aggregate in the end, 3-1 in this game.
Yeah, he played 3-5-2 against Eddie Howe, didn't he, for the first half. Then he rectified it and played 4-4-2 or something. Gordon's injured, no surprise, he's played a lot of football. I think that's Newcastle's nearly his 40th game of the season, something ridiculous already. 35-40. Their players aren't used to it. Last season they didn't do it. You look at their next few fixtures, home to Brentford tomorrow, away against Tottenham, then you've got the FA Cup away at Villa, then you've got to go to Kazakhstan to play Carabao, then away at Man City again, then Carabao at home, then you've got Everton at home, and then you're home to Man United. So that's in the next month they've got a brutal fixture list. But their transfers this summer were absolutely shocking, and this comes from Eddie Howe. He's got rid of all the sporting directors there. He wanted total control on transfers. He appointed one of his family members as well to be a facto sporting member, or whatever they call it now. And they bought Johan Visser, who's 29, for the best part of 55 million quid. One of the worst buys ever. I can't believe that Brentford must count their lucky stars, how they got that much money for him. Christmas come early times 10. Anthony Elanga for the same price. Shocking. Absolutely shocking.
How can you say that, James? He scored a brilliant goal.
He also missed one of the worst misses you'll see all season as well. Absolutely, their recruitment was shambolic. And we talked about it on Monday. Bruno Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali, they'll be knocking on the door to their agents and saying, we want to Champions League football next season. I can't see either of them staying at Newcastle. The noise, obviously, Tonali, no smoke without fire with him as well. And Bruno as well. See how vital he is. When he's not fit, they look a shadow of the team.
I think one of the things that was interesting for me a little bit was this was their third tricky game in 6 days. So they've been away at Liverpool, they've been away at Paris Saint-Germain, and then obviously you're away at Man City. Obviously, particularly away at Liverpool in that first half, they pressed relentlessly, right? You're going to try and press against Paris Saint-Germain. You're trying to press against Manchester City. Teams aren't built to press relentlessly, 3 times in 6 days away from home. There has to be some semblance of sort of common sense. And I just feel like it was lacking massively. And even to the point where you're missing 2 of your 3 key midfielders, whether you like them or not, Joel Linton and Bruno. So obviously you've got Tonali. What does he do with Tonali? He plays him the whole 90 minutes. Instead of
taking him off at half time.
Instead of taking him off at half time like he did with Hall, Tonali is just about your single, along with the likes of Hall, there aren't many more important players in this Newcastle team at the moment than Tonali. Get him off, give him a little bit of respite, and protect him a little bit ahead of what is obviously a really tough run coming up. Because I also had the conversation as to what point should they even make changes in the first place. Is once they conceded that, the second goal, is you can make a pretty good argument that they should have made substitutions then.
I get what you mean, but it is a bad look when...
No, but it's the bigger picture. You have to look at the bigger picture. Newcastle's bigger picture is Brentford at home at the weekend and try and have as many fit players as possible. You're not going to beat a Manchester City, even with their defensive issues, when you're effectively 4 goals behind in the tie.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just the optics, isn't it? You're taking off Tonali, but he did it at half time. He took off players at half time, protected them, but yeah, not taking off your most important player at the moment because Bruno is injured still with that ankle injury.
And
They should be knocking on the door and saying to Mr. Howe, "Thank you very much in the summer. You've taken as far as you can do. We need to go and get a top class manager in, please."
And just touching on one of my absolute pet hates at the moment is substitutions, and when teams do it. But you see Gordon get injured, right? Fatigue is a real thing. Load management is a real thing. You cannot expect to play these players like literally thousands and thousands of minutes in a season and not expect some consequences. Is Pep Guardiola, we've talked about it so many times. You can't criticise arguably the greatest ever manager. What on this planet are you doing bringing Rodri, Haaland and Cherky on for the last 20 minutes in that game?
Parents' money? For their financial issues? I don't know.
Why? What possible
no
good
idea.
Outcome, what possible good outcome comes of that?
There is no possible good outcome. The outcome is they get injured.
And so you've got a player like Rodri, who has had injury problems, obviously. You've had Cherky, who has had little niggles here and there. You've got Haaland, who's clearly your most important player at the moment. I mean, it doesn't even make a semblance of sense.
Maybe they're giving the fans that turned up a view of their best players. Or non-fans that they turned up.
Okay, so let's touch on that, James. That was a brilliant segue into talking about Manchester City and their fan base. Not necessarily the fan base, but obviously at the Etihad on, which was it, Wednesday night, there were a ton of empty seats. It wasn't, I'm not going to say, use the word embarrassing, but there were so many empty seats and it was so clearly there for everyone to see.
The Etihad. That's the top thing across the camera. You saw a kickoff was just basically empty, and they claim to have the most fans and all this business and building new seats.
Biggest revenues, James.
Yeah, okay. We've talked about it. Let's move on. But actually, one thing about this, I see Carragher today in his article has said that Pep Guardiola is the best manager ever. I read the article and I wish I hadn't.
Why were you thinking that something Jamie Carragher had written would,
I wish I'd never seen it, but anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, I don't think there's huge amounts more to add on that game. I do think Eddie Howe was in a tricky position going into that game. That game was obviously lost in that first leg, where they were very passive. Go figure, honestly, in terms of when they're deciding to be passive or not, who knows? But he was in a very difficult position, and he gets made to look a little bit silly, which it's not ideal. Transfer windows closed. There weren't huge numbers of transfers really. You also had the big money. Obviously, Semenyo and Guehi going to City. On that final day, there were quite a lot of shenanigans involving Crystal Palace. They obviously got the deal for Strand Larsen over the line. Looks an awful lot of money for him. The Mateta deal to AC Milan fell through because of a failed medical. Interesting, I don't know how much more Mateta will play for Palace. I don't know whether that's his dreams of a big move have gone now. I don't know.
Yeah, knee injury, wasn't it?
And then we come on to Dwight McNeil. It was a bit out. I mean, I had seen McNeil linked with Forest earlier in the day. Bit of a left field move, to be honest, in the first place. If it's the McNeil I've seen play for Everton this year, he's always a bit younger than I would think. He's been around an awful long time. He's only 26, I think. But 20 million for McNeil to Palace fell through very, very late on. I think all parties were a little bit surprised by how it played out. I don't think Palace come out of it looking particularly great.
Palace not looking great again in transfers, are they? Kel surprise. Happened in the summer, happened again in January. Clubs, agents, players will take notice of this, how they are treating prospective players and players they have and how they deal with transfers. It's not a good look how Dwight McNeil again, Mark Gay in the summer as well, plus others. They've got to be very careful, Palace and Parish. Talked about it a couple of weeks ago. But £20 million for Dwight McNeil, Everton thought it was Christmas again. What did they?
Well, they didn't get it in the end.
Well, this is the thing I want to talk about. The market is so inflated. You're talking like £20 million where it didn't happen, but for Dwight McNeil, £50 million for Strand Larsen, £50 million for Jamie Gittins, who's obviously now injured at Chelsea with a torn hamstring. But he's essentially their third choice. And I hear Chelsea fans going, "Oh, we don't need a left winger." Well, you just spent 50, 55 pound on a lad that when everyone's fit, he's never going to be on your bench. He'll be sitting in the stands. The market's so inflated, it's become a joke. And players have got to realise, these youngsters, that you can't just go and follow the money where you're going to be paid big bucks or you follow your agent. You've got to go to clubs that actually give you chances to play. And these kids need chances to play. You don't develop sitting on the bench or under 21 football or training every week. You've got to go and start playing some football. You can't just go to clubs like Chelsea, stockpile kids, and just not play. Your career is only a short span. Go and play some football somewhere.
I think what's interesting is I would almost say it's like 60 million to 30 million. There's an awful lot of very average footballers nowadays in that range. And, and look at like Villa signing Gesson, that 30 million sort of range. Absolute garbage. You look at Brennan Johnson, there's so many. If you go through all the transfers from the summer, there's a whole host of terrible Hatto at Chelsea looked, 45 million or whatever he was, doesn't look a brilliant signing. You got your Garnachos who's done okay at Chelsea, but you're talking what it makes you think is that actually at the top end of the market, so the ones which cost 80, 90, 100 million, where people are reluctant to go, I've always said tends to represent better value in terms of the quality of players you're getting.
Transfers has just gone completely crazy. The money involved in very ordinary footballers. Did you see on transfers? Did you see a couple of random ones? Victor Moses is still playing. He's now in Kazakhstan playing for Kaiser.
Does he need the money? You've got,
yeah, but ex-Chelsea and Liverpool, John Duran, that Villa sold for huge money this time last year, wasn't it? To Saudi.
Sell high, James, sell high.
He's now gone to Zenit St. Petersburg. You got N'Golo Kante, he's come back from Saudi, he's now gone to Fenerbahce. Some random transfers went on during the last couple of days.
I think transfers are interesting because if you look back on the summer, the number of transfers which have been fairly disastrous is pretty high. I mean, there's a ton of, really poor transfers. I mean, you only have to look at Newcastle as a poster boys for that. But I used to think transfers, it might be one out of every two was successful or would fail. I think that the numbers that fail now are even greater than that when you look through previous transfers in terms of what you'd class as a big success. It might be just because the prices are so high now, relatively, but so few transfers end up being hugely successful.
Just look at Man City, January 2025, they bought Kuznetsov, exactly, Reece, Nico Gonzalez, Omar Mamouche.
Yeah.
They've essentially replaced all of them already.
It's crazy. And ironically, the best signing City have made was Cherki.
Yeah, for 30-odd million quid, yeah.
So, yeah, transfers...
But if you chuck a load of money, eventually you should get one, right?
Man United are the poster boys for that. So, a couple of other interesting things to talk about. One is Christian Romero and his continual rants at the Tottenham hierarchy. Obviously, he's shown displeasure towards Frank as well at various points. He plays like an angry man. He comments like an angry man. He just seems very unhappy with life, I think, at Tottenham at the moment. He was linked with moves to, I think it was Atletico Madrid last summer. I don't get the feeling he's going to be around at Tottenham he won't be at Tottenham this time next year, I don't think.
Captain as well. And he was moaning about, we should have bought some players. You have got 12 or 13 first-team players injured. They're not like all first-team players injured at the moment. So they have got a big squad. And did you see the reports in the week about the spending and the net spend? Because Guardiola had a thing, didn't he, on his press conference. They've spent an absolute fortune, Tottenham, in the last 5 years. They're over £1 billion. Their net spend is about 650 million quid or something. It's remarkable what they've spent. They've spent it very badly. It's nothing to do with money. It's like United and Tottenham were the two biggest net spenders in the last 5 years or something.
Okay, so I think net spend can be a bit misleading, and I'll give you an example where that's slightly misleading. So Villa used to be quite prominent in those lists before the last 2 or 3 years. But that's partly because when they came back up to from the Championship, they needed to effectively buy a whole new squad. And so what you end up with is net spend is on the basis of, it's on top of what you currently have. So if Tottenham don't have an amazing squad, they're not getting amazing youngsters coming through either, then you're more likely to have to spend a lot of money. So if you look at someone like Arsenal, they actually have had, with the likes of Saka, obviously you've got Lewis Skelly, you've got Martin. You actually have some decent youngsters coming through, which helps sort of supplement the squad. So I think net spend can be a little bit misleading. I think wages has always been the best barometer of future success in terms of if you spend a lot of money on wages, it tends to correlate really well with how successful teams are.
Yeah, so I'm doing Tottenham a bit of disservice. They're the fourth biggest spender, so net spender. So you've got Man United, 678 million, give or take roughly. You've got Arsenal are second in 666. Then you've got Chelsea 652. Tottenham 577, and then there's a drop to Newcastle, Liverpool, who are 430, and then Man City are 388 if you believe them. But Tottenham have spent a lot of money. That's just my point on Romero. They have spent a lot of money, and I go back to your point: is he looking for a move away for Champions League football next season? Is this why he's doing all this noise in the press at the moment, or on Instagram or social media, wherever he's doing it?
It certainly feels that way. It feels a real... So I see Leicester finally got their deduction. We touched on it a couple of weeks ago when the manager got sacked as to what a mess it's shaping up to be for them. So they've got a 6-point deduction. There was some chat that that's very much on the lenient side of where they were at. It leaves them slap bang in the middle of a relegation dogfight now. I think last time I saw they were effectively 3-point relegated. So in theory, they're likely to be okay. But I think the worry you'd have for Leicester is more the knock-on consequences if they do get relegated. I don't know if their players they have, all the contracts, factor in double relegation and things like that, because there will be plenty of players there who are on big, big money that you simply cannot sustain in League One, just from a salary point of view. They would need to completely reset. And the unfortunate thing for Leicester is they do have some decent youngsters like Monga, and you'll just see these players get cherry-picked by the bigger teams. And it becomes a bit of an endless cycle of losing your best players, being left with players you don't particularly want. And it becomes really, really difficult to get back out of League One.
Yeah, they could go the same way as Leeds and took ages to get out of the League One and Championship back into the Premier League. They are badly mismanaged since they got relegated, and now big issues. There's more talk, isn't there? They've got more financial woes as well coming along, so they could go against the Championship wages as well. Not looking good for any Leicester fans out there.
But I think what it should serve is as a reminder to sort of all the, when everyone looks at things like financial fair play and these sorts of things, is they've been hamstrung by not being able to spend effectively. The club has the money, but they've been clobbered by various rules that have ensured that having got up into those 4th, 5th, 6th places in the league, it's very, very difficult to stay there. It's so difficult to compete in those positions. You make one or two bad signings here or there, and things can fall apart very quickly.
That's a key, bad signings. They spent £40 million on Harry Winks and Oliver Skipp from Tottenham. I have no sympathy at times. Who on earth is looking at those two players and going, no, that's a good signing. Oh yeah, we'll spend 20 million. Oh, here you go. Write a cheque to Tottenham for 20 million quid for both of them. Absolute lunacy. So I do have a little bit of sympathy with them, but when you make these terrible decisions that you see quite regularly, but the
difference is they make these bad decisions. They get relegated, and the club, if they get relegated again, you're not miles away from the club being in critical straits, right? Dire straits in terms of whether that club exists or not, because financially they're going to be in such a mess.
Well, they're probably going to administration and get more points deducted next season anyway.
It ends up being a very vicious cycle. So I've no problem. We touched on earlier transfers. Very difficult to get transfers right in terms of consistently. So Leicester make a couple of bad decisions on transfers, and they pay the price. You look at Manchester United. They have had so many bad transfers. You can even look at someone like an Arsenal, right? Arsenal, look at the signings Arsenal made in the summer. Gyökeres, okay? Eze doesn't look an amazing signing. Obviously, Zubimendi was fine. Who else did they sign? I can't remember. But anyway, the point is that those signings, Zubimendi, fine, but they can make these big mistakes. Manchester United, for the last 5 years, have made mistake after mistake after mistake. And they're fine, because they have such high revenues. They can continue to make mistake after mistake, and eventually they'll hit on a few good ones. So it looks like, obviously, like Mbeumo, looks like it'll be a decent signing. They will eventually hit on good signings. But if you're the teams just below, you can't have a situation where all your signings need to be so perfect for you to be able to compete or stay in the division.
Yeah, you can't make perfect signings all the time, you're right. but they have to be better at it.
So, I mean, I guess what you could do is you could just be Liverpool and steal the best youngsters from other teams, James. I mean, I'm not going to say Liverpool have a history for this, but we saw a tribunal for Rio Ngumoha, however you pronounce him. Ngumoha, that's the one. Obviously, he was at Chelsea. He left to join Liverpool. It looks like it's £2.8 million up front, up to another £4 million worth of bonuses, depending on appearances, national caps. 20% sell-on as well. It never feels quite right, this, to be honest, in terms of never feels like it's a correct sort of valuation of these players. So we have seen history of this with Harvey Elliott when he left Fulham. They got £1.5 million Fulham did. They got up to 2.8 million in bonuses, and they got a 20% sell-on fee. Everyone knew that Harvey Elliott was going to be a serious player upon leaving Fulham. All it does is it hinders the smaller clubs. I'm not saying obviously Chelsea are a smaller club. No great sympathy for Chelsea in this situation, in most situations, but I do have sympathy for them in this particular situation.
That's what clubs are doing. We mentioned it a couple of months ago, didn't we? That clubs are now buying a lot of youngsters from smaller teams just to stockpile them almost, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, there's another lad at Liverpool called Joshua Abe, 15-year-old who's been training as a first team the last couple of weeks, who looks a real talent, a winger. He actually arguably looks better than Ngumoha. But he's just signed for Trent Alexander-Arnold's brother's agency, which is not a good sign for Liverpool at all. And he's been shown around PSG and he's been shown around Real Madrid as well. Clubs are looking at youngsters and not getting first-team opportunities, even at 15 or 16. What? And they're offering them pathways to the first 11. And that's how Liverpool got Ngumoha, said, we'll fast track you into the first 11 or the first team squad anyway.
No, but I think the problem is, so Ngumoha, when did he join? In the summer?
No, last year.
Okay, last year.
2024 he joined in summer 2024.
Okay, so he's been 18 months. If he was on the open market now, I'm pretty sure that some team would pay probably 25-30 million pounds for him.
Double, probably.
Well, but as a minimum, okay. Tell me how compensation of up to 6.8 million plus a 20% sell-on is appropriate compensation. Unless you're going to make the sell-on fee like 50%, or you have something which is something along the lines of, if you get an England cap, it's a £10 million compensation. So you're actually weighting it for the more successful that they are, the bigger payment. It just doesn't feel like it even touches the sides on his value.
Yeah, it doesn't at all, but it's always been like that, and it should change, really. I like the idea of having, if you get an international cap, it's 10 million quid if you get, or whatever it is. So that's where you can get your money back, essentially, if you develop that player.
Any other football stories, James? Oh, so we did want to touch on one thing, actually, multi-club ownership. So we see it with the transfer window. So we had this, obviously Chelsea and Strasbourg are owned by Blueco, and they've had 12 transfers between the two teams this season. Some of that is just lone players going backwards and forwards. It just seems all a little bit crazy. Not that it's allowed, but it's so prominent.
I don't like it at all. It shouldn't be going... I mean, obviously Rosenior came from Strasbourg as well. He shouldn't be able to... Bren Chilwell's at Strasbourg just because Maresca didn't fancy him at all. Who's paying the wages? I just think it's all very dodgy. It's hush-hush. It's just, you can't having 12 transfers between two clubs that are owned by the same individuals, same company. It's just a little bit, I just don't like it at all. I don't think you should be able to just, when they say they pay the market value, but only the market value is a team that are prepared to pay that money anyway. So, yeah.
Well, the market value is never tested in these situations because these players aren't going on the open market. It's not a case of...
Yeah.
So we don't know what the true market value is. I think the only thing I would say is I think it's probably been good for Strasbourg in terms of being competitive because they suddenly get an injection of cash, they get an injection of players. But on the flip side to that, they are basically Chelsea's bitches, for want of a better phrase. If Chelsea want Rosenior goes. If they want any players back, they get them. I did see something interesting. I think it was on the BBC where they were saying that before Blueco came in, Strasbourg had spent 6.1, 3.9 and 9.5 million in the 3 seasons before they came in. Since Blueco have been in, Strasbourg have spent 52.6, 53.6 and 96.5 on players. I think I think the other concern is that there are other teams who are doing this. So obviously you've got links between Man United and Nice. You've got Manchester City and Girona. You've got Watford, Udinese, teams like this.
Yeah, Liverpool obviously want another club as well. I'd imagine Villa. Villa have got not another club, but don't they have some sort of
They have a few sort of lower league
in
teams.
other clubs?
Spain,
You'll see it more and more
Carabao
often.
Union. They
Yeah,
have Portuguese team as well. So and they've got teams in Brazil and places like that. So they all do it.
not sure it's quite right, but it's here to stay, unfortunately.
Because I think the Man City Girona, was it Savinho who came from Girona?
Yeah, for 25 million quid. Yeah, okay, yeah.
If that.
And they've replaced him anyway with Shirky and Semenya anyway. So
Let's have a look at this weekend's Premier League action.
do you want to run through some bit of European football first, whatever happened in the week?
Yep, far away.
So in Scotland, Hearts unfortunately lost a game. Well, they lost to St Mirren. Their third red card in 5 games. Rangers won the following night 5-1. Tavernier scored again from a penalty spot. It's remarkable how many penalties he gets and scores.
What's a
Celtic,
penalty?
yeah, 4 minutes into the game, red card and a penalty, essentially game over. Celtic Aberdeen was postponed. Celtic were moaning that it was postponed so late on. There's no Scottish Premier League this weekend. It's all Scottish Cup. They're back next midweek for games. In Spain, Barcelona won against... Barcelona were in the cup, weren't they? Midweek cup game. Rashford scored a thaw, they won. They play Mallorca on Saturday. Madrid are away at Valencia on Sunday night, and they're 1 point clear, Barcelona. In Serie A, Inter are playing Sassuolo on Sunday afternoon. They're 5 points clear. Juventus versus Lazio. And AC Milan aren't playing this weekend. They won in the week 3-0, and Kunku scored a thaw. They aren't playing because they're due to be a home game, but the San Siro is being used for the Winter Olympics that starts tonight, the opening ceremony. And talking of the San Siro, that's also been knocked down. It's been they're making a completely new stadium for the 2 Milan clubs, which is a shame. I never actually got to go and see the San Siro. Just go and watch a game in the San Siro. I just remember it from the 1990 World Cup.
I've only one memory of San Siro, James. It was after Villa had beaten Inter Milan in the first leg 2-0. Went and lost 3-0 there. The third goal, the ball must have been out by 3 foot on the byline. Go watch it. Absolutely scandalous, but that's what happens in football. So let's obviously got Leeds Forest tonight. Do quite like Friday night games. I quite like to find the more games that are on, just the better in terms of the way they're spread out. Interesting game tonight as well. Leeds Forest. I think both 6 points clear of West Ham. I'm not sure either of these teams want to lose this game, particularly when West Ham are away at Burnley. Pick up a win there, suddenly gets very interesting at the bottom. Leeds Forest tonight. Going to be interesting. I'm not convinced Forest are all that. They've obviously had a couple of results. They obviously had the draw against Palace last weekend when they were down to 10 men. I think that might be a game they look back on, and if they were to get relegated, Forest, I think that's a game they would look back on and regret. You know, you're 1-0 up at home against Palace, and obviously Williams is saved on the line, as we touched on earlier in the week, but you don't win that game. In the end, you're holding on. And Forest didn't play particularly well in that game. Palace were the better team for large parts of it. So I'm not convinced Forest are particularly great, to be honest.
They would take a point now, wouldn't they, Sean Dyche? Have you offered a point now?
Definitely. I think
Anybody for a 0-0?
Ellen Road on a Friday evening. I think that's a pretty tricky tie, to be honest.
They take the 0-0 now. Absolutely, bite your hands off. They're going to go there very negative for us. Be interesting to see who they play left back because Nico Williams is suspended. I think they'll go there and they'll be quite happy to be very negative. Us in the crowd. You briefly, take time out of the game. All the usual tricks you do from the away side. Bootlaces, changing where the goal kicks are taken, going down with fake injuries, etc. All the tricks will be in full use by Sean Dyche tonight.
Okay, so I think Morata will probably play left back. Savona's out injured at the moment. Hudson-Odoi looks like he'll miss out as well. I think Forest have to be a little bit careful because I remember when they came to Villa Park maybe 3 weeks ago and they came in incredibly negative. And obviously Villa scored just before half time, I think it was. And I remember, I think it was Gibbs White was saying afterwards that they were happy with how they played in that first half. They were awful. It's one of the worst performances I've seen from Forest. And I do worry that if Dyche sends them to be that negative tonight, I think they lose. Forest were very good against with 10 men against Palace at the weekend. But Palace aren't very good at breaking teams down. When Palace have lots of possession, they really struggle. I think this will be a different challenge for them, and I think Forest are better. It's where one of the problems with Dyche is they're not suited to playing super negative football. You don't have players like your Gibbs Whites and Andersons and all the other attacking options that they have to be really negative. There's not a team built to be negative.
But you got a negative manager in Sean Dyche.
No, you do, and that's where I would worry for them a little bit tonight. Is I don't think he knows how to change his ways. I think he'll go there and be very negative. And if Leeds get an early goal, I just struggle to see how Forest responds.
Open a game up and try and change tactics, and when you played all week to play a certain way that they'll play tonight for the first 45, 60 minutes, they'll try and keep it really quiet. They'll try and not concede, be a low block. See it.
So there are quite a few interesting games this weekend. So lunchtime tomorrow, Man United, Tottenham. Again, it's going to be a good benchmark as to where United are. I don't think they were brilliant against Fulham. I think they were probably a little bit fortunate to get that win. I think they're playing Tottenham at a good time in terms of injuries. Although it looks like Romero and Van de Ven will be fit. So it's not going to be a Tottenham backline absolutely decimated to quite the same extent. I think the interesting thing for me will be is whether they'll play 3 centre-backs again or whether they'll revert to a normal back 4.
I would imagine they go to 3 at the back again. I know they changed second half last week, but that was against Man City. That's because they got the injury in the first half and had no real other option but to go 4 at the back and play 2 up top. But I kind of like this when they get a little bit more protection and they can play Solanke up there with the 2 Odegaard or however they want to play in those 2 10 positions, and then use your wing backs, as the wide players, and then you can get back. You got a Doggy and Porro is Porro fit?
So who do they play? Spence could play there if he's fit. So obviously he's been struggling as well.
So they might have to go back to 4, or they could play Archie Gray there.
So what's a shame is that I've always felt that Porro is much more suited to playing as a right wing back than a right back. His defensive work's terrible, but going forward, obviously he brings quite a lot to the party. But he's obviously out at the moment, which doesn't help them.
Yeah, they haven't got a bad record at Old Trafford in recent times either. So, Cunha will play because Dorga's obviously out injured left wing. United are pretty settled at the moment, who they're going to play under Carrick. Again, it's which goalkeeper doesn't make the most mistakes. I don't rate Vicario and don't rate Lawrence at all either. So, it is a good time to play Tottenham with all their injuries. But Tottenham should go there and fancy getting something out of it. There's no reason to be scared of United playing at all. You're going up there.
No, and one thing I don't think Frank is going to be overly aggressive in terms of how Tottenham come out at United. So I think United tend to be better suited to teams who actually come and play against them. So if you looked at the Arsenal and City games, compare it to the Fulham game. Fulham were happy to sit in last week and they caused United plenty of problems. United aren't, even with the likes of Bruno and others, they're not amazing at breaking down teams in a low block. Arsenal obviously get a nice home match against Sunderland. Obviously it was a good game when these two teams met earlier in the season with Broby's late equaliser. No Xhaka, as we say, for Sunderland. For Arsenal, it looks like we don't know for certain, but Saka and Odegaard went in training yesterday, so it remains to be seen whether they are available or not. I think with the depth that Arsenal have, it doesn't really make that much difference. These aren't they're not key misses in the way they may once have been.
No, to play Havertz on that right-hand side in midfield with Zubimendi and Rice, he's a better option than Eze in that midfield at the moment. I'd imagine Havertz will play.
It's tough to imagine.
I don't think it's an easy game for Arsenal. I wouldn't be looking at it going, it's an easy game. Sunderland are decent.
No, but Arsenal tend to be pretty good at this type of... We've seen a few times. I just remember when Brentford went there in form and they rested a couple of players and they obviously lost 2-0, and Arsenal are pretty good at winning these games 2-3-0. They don't concede. They just don't concede, and they normally find a way to nick a couple of goals here or there. Burnley, West Ham, I think that first goal is going to be so important. Burnley were obviously terrible against Sunderland. West Ham should have got something out of that Chelsea game. West Ham are showing signs of life, particularly with Castellanos and Pablo now. Paqueta gone. It feels like they're a little bit more settled. The thing that we see about Burnley is when they concede, they are really poor. They are just simply not able to adapt and try and chase games. You saw it against Sunderland on Monday night. They're not a good football team. Their best hope is to keep that game as tight as possible for as long as possible. West Ham, if you're going to stay up, I've probably said this 8 times about West Ham already this season, but this is a must-win game. They have to be getting 3 points here.
Yeah, they've got goals in their team, West Ham. Carabao obviously scored again last week. Yeah, West Ham need to win that game probably to have some sort of chance. They can't be going there. If they lose there, then that's really bad. But they're in a bit of form. I know they lost obviously last week, but for first half against Chelsea, they were useful.
They played well. They played some nice stuff. I think I'd be a little bit, if I was a Tottenham fan or Palace fan, that result last weekend, I'd be thinking we dodged a massive bullet because they could easily have won that game against Chelsea.
Somerville's in form as well on the left-hand side. He's got a load of pace as well, dangerous, scoring goals, confident.
So we've got Wolves, Chelsea. Chelsea have had a lot of big games. I always worry with these types of games. The games where you have this, I always talk about mental letdowns. So you tend to find after European games, Chelsea have had, they've had Napoli, they had the West Ham game, they've had the Arsenal game. You now go away to a team you're expected to beat, doesn't have much to play for. These are the ones where you see your true colours of your players in terms of attitude and how much you actually want it, whether they're willing to put in the hard yards. And these are the games you see so often, you're left disappointed.
Yeah, Reece James and Pedro Neto are doubts as well. I mean, they can play Garnacho and they can play Palmer and they can play Esteval. Not bad. And João Pedro. Yeah, it is. They've got to match Wolves' work rate. And once they do, their quality should shine through. But if they don't match them and they're slightly off, it's a hard way to change that momentum during a game when flick that switch. If you're not right at it in these types of games, Saturday afternoon as well.
I also wonder if Rosenior will make a lot of changes again. He made a lot of changes for that West Ham game. Whether it'll be quite so brave this time, maybe not. But then that has knock-on consequences going forward. If you've got players you need resting, and you're not, like Pedro's played an awful lot of football recently.
Yeah, and if they lost him, I think what they'll try and do is they'll probably try and win the game in the first 60, 65 minutes and change. I can't see him making all those changes again, but who knows? Might happen, but I doubt it.
Bournemouth, Villa. I don't know what to think about this. Obviously, Villa. I would say one of Villa's 2 or 3 best performances of the year was against Bournemouth at Villa Park. Beat them 4-0, absolutely hammered them. It was a game, if you looked at the stats, it would show that Bournemouth were somewhat unfortunate. But if you actually watched that first half, Villa murdered them, honestly. And what was interesting about that game a little bit was you expected Bournemouth to come out with a really high press, and it was actually Villa who came out with a high press. It was really weird in terms of sort of expectations of that game. So I don't quite know what will happen here. Bournemouth have obviously had a few decent results recently. Obviously Villa had a terrible result against Brentford last week. I mean, they didn't necessarily play all that badly, but some days it just doesn't happen. Tricky place to go, Bournemouth. Villa haven't done amazingly there. Obviously they won back end of last year down there, but tricky game. I can see goals in that game. Every Bournemouth game seems to just have goals. They are so poor defensively, so we will see.
And the weather down on South Coast tomorrow looks horrendous. And they will play a part in the game. Because that ground at Bournemouth, where it's not Dean Court, just meant to call it Dean Court, but that's
Vitality.
Their Vitality system. It holds 11,000. Different conversation for a different day. But the wind and the rain and the elements play a huge part in games down there when it looks like the forecast for the whole of the UK actually tomorrow looks really bad again, but that will play a part, especially for goalkeepers and defenders on the long balls and things like that.
Newcastle Brentford Saturday evening, I think it is. Very difficult for Newcastle. Brentford week off to prepare. Gordon looks like he'll be out for multiple weeks with hamstring. They have obviously other injuries. We don't know if Bruno, Joel Linton, Livramento, they've plenty of other injuries. Going to be a tough game for them because Brentford are good on the break as well. Newcastle will come and attack them, and yeah, I can see Brentford having a field day on the counter attack. If
no Kevin Shard
slightly off.
Yeah, no Kevin Shard for Brentford. Obviously after his 3-match ban for kicking out last week, brainless. But who will play in goal for Newcastle? Will Nick Pope come back, or they'll keep Ramsdale?
Pope will return. I think Pope's their number one. I think Ramsdale. I thought it was going to happen in midweek. Actually, I think. Yeah, I mean neither option's great. Let's be honest.
Both. You can see why they wanted James Trafford during the summer.
But that's costly not getting that over the line.
Fiddling around, arguing about Bryce and things like that.
Sunday, obviously Brighton Palace. I think it's known as the biggest derby in English football. I still don't understand how this is a thing. It must be the worst derby going. I guess I don't know. Brighton struggle with some of these home games. Obviously, they should have beaten Everton. Every time you think Brighton should win a game, they don't. They should. I think Palace are a real mess. Brighton should be able to get something out of that game, really positive. But with the way Brighton play, it actually suits Palace as well. It's actually quite a good matchup for Palace because Brighton will press them and they will hit them in transitions. But obviously no Mateta either. It's just Palace are just a mess at the moment.
Brandon Arsenal will make his debut play up front when he was Sarr and Brendan Johnson. But for Palace, this is a game they can sit back in that low block, have 25% of the ball, everything's in front of them, don't let whoever back or Ruta play going behind, and then try and counter. Transition, get the ball. Is Wharton back available? Not sure. But Munoz is obviously back fit, isn't he?
Wharton should be available.
Yeah, so this is a game.
Yeah, so Wharton will be fit. Available even.
Yeah, tricky. The only one thing from this is that James Milner's equaling the Premier League record. It's number 653, and there's also a lot of chatter actually now amongst Brighton fans that he's just been given games to get the record. He's not actually justifying his position on the bench or even coming on. He is 40. He shouldn't be playing Premier League football. Let's start talking some proper talk. He's way too old for Premier League football.
And so let's talk about the other big game of the weekend. I mean, I guess the fans of Arsenal will be looking on at this one, hoping that Liverpool turn up. So Liverpool play Manchester City. Feeling confident, James?
No, not at all.
That's not like you.
Well, moving their most important midfielder to right back again, so Boswell have to play right back because obviously they've got no Gomez, no Frimpong and no Bradley. So Boswell play right back, which is just negates him, and he'll be up against, well, City should target him. Doku or, well, they will play Doku, I'd imagine. Man City will try and control that space in midfield. But if Liverpool can get Wirtz onto the ball and that City high line, Ekitike could have a field day against Mark Gay and Kusinov. Especially Kusinov, who's just, I know his pace. I've talked about it to blue in the face, but he makes so many errors, basic errors, that if Liverpool can exploit his weakness. But then Liverpool got Gakpo on that side as well, and he's just a waste of a shirt at the moment. So, yeah, it's just he'll take the chances again. It's just Van Dijk normally has a very good game against Haaland. It's one that you watch him, Haaland doesn't like playing him because Van Dijk is physical, you can't really bully him. Can Konate back up his performance against Newcastle? Because if he can, then Haaland will have a tough game against those two because they are big, strong and physical presences. I'm never confident with Liverpool under Slot at the moment. I don't think he's the right. I've said it since October. Yeah, I don't know. It should be a good game. And obviously, Man City are going to have to win if Arsenal beat Sunderland on Saturday. They can't be messing around. But it is a tough place to go to Anfield under the lights at 4:30 on a Sunday afternoon. Crowd should be up for it. Liverpool got a little bit of momentum. Obviously, beating Carabao and beating Newcastle. There's a slightly good a feel-good thing going on. They're trying to obviously back Slot with that release of a PR nonsense exercise that was recorded straight after the Barnsley game and then dropped after the transfer window. I mean, PR done perfectly. Season's gone in the league for Liverpool. It's all about the Champions League.
You might not make the Champions League next year if you don't buck your ideas up.
I don't think we will if Slot continues in the job, no.
I think you'll be fine. Look, you spent fortunes in summer, James. You're not going to not finish in the top 5. If it was top 4, maybe. Top 5, I think it'll be fine. I think I'm intrigued to see Manchester City because I feel a bit of a quandary as to where they're at the moment. I don't know how good they are. You know, you watch them sometimes and you think they look really good. They look like not the City of old. And then you watch them and they look a little bit like the team who went through that dreadful run last year. And I don't know, they just look incredibly... Even in that Newcastle game in midweek, there was no control to it. Obviously, there's a bit of control in that first half, but they concede just way too many, like, really, really good chances to be a top team. Newcastle,
that's the thing, though.
Very wasteful.
If Liverpool can exploit that high line and the chances that Man City offer up constantly, it's just whether you can take them. And that's why I want Szoboszlai to play. If he could play in the 10 or... have a go at Rodri and stop the ball into Rodri and make him look slow and with his injuries and play Wirtz off the left, but they don't have anyone else who can play right back. So
Jones play there, or is that
he could
ask against Doku?
Too big an ask, and Slot and Jones aren't seen eye to eye by all accounts.
You've got to be a bigger man than have disagreements with key players, James.
Scott's shown he can't deal. His man management skills are non-existent. It's clear as day.
Salah.
You don't have
Salah.
Alexis McAllister, Curtis Jones. There's a lot of players, 3 major players kind of thing, who have all come out and had a pop in the media at various times and various ways.
Well, I think what's going to be interesting is that this feels like a pivotal weekend, because it's very, very possible that Arsenal could be 8-9 points clear come Sunday evening. In fact, that's a likely outcome. So it feels like, and if Arsenal, it was one thing when they were 4 points clear, but this Arsenal team isn't blowing a lead 7, 8, 9 points. It's just not happening.
If it's 9 points, it's game over completely, yeah.
Even if it was 8, it's game over. This City team's not good enough to go on a crazy run, I don't think.
They'd need to win like 11 games in a trot or something ridiculous. Even the game at the Etihad, Arsenal could afford to lose it if they're that clear, yeah.
I think I said a few weeks ago, I think Arsenal will win by double digits. I stand by that.
Yeah, get 85 points or something, yeah.
Okay, let's wrap it up. There will be another sports podcast later today. And yeah, enjoy the football.
Yeah, any questions, give us a shout, but enjoy the weekend sport and football. Goodbye.